Now that you have an understanding of what Temboo is, we can begin the process of creating a new Choreo. The function of this Choreo will be to acquire sensor data from an Arduino and store the data in a Google Spreadsheet. In this lecture, I'll walk you through the process of setting up the Choreo in Temboo. Because our Choreo will be accessing a Google Cloud service, we will also need to set up the appropriate credentials containing the permissions necessary to do so. Once you complete and understand this lecture, you'll know how to integrate any of the available Google services with a Temboo Choreo. Let's check it out. As a first example of working with Temboo and your Arduino, I'd like to show you how to create a little application that allows you to record temperature and humidity readings to a Google spreadsheet. Do that because I can see down here, I can scroll down to the Google related Choreos that Google gives me access to spreadsheets. So there's a variety of things that I can do with Google Spreadsheets, and one of them is the AppendRow Choreo, which allows me to append a comma-separated row of data to any Google spreadsheet that I've got legal access to, of course. So let's start with creating a spreadsheet on Google to which I will start later sending temperature and humidity data. So I'll go to my Google Drive and I've got a Temboo examples folder, and in here we'll create a new Google Sheet. You can have as many columns as you like in your Google Sheets. You can populate arbitrary data, and those could be either numbers or words, phrases, so letters, alphanumerical data. The first row must always contain a header. So just say that the first column will be temperature and the second column will be humidity. And I will name my spreadsheet to be Explore Temboo example. Okay. So I'll leave this aside for now. I'm going to need to use the name for the spreadsheet later, so I'll keep this tab open as well. Then I need to deal with permissions. I need to get credentials from Google so that Temboo is allowed to access and edit this spreadsheet that I've just created. So I go back to Temboo and my AppendRow Choreo. You can see that I need to provide a client ID, which is provided by Google, and a client secret, which is also provided by Google. And then there's another piece of information that this Choreo needs, which is the refresh token. So the documentation here indicates that this refresh token is an OAuth piece of information. So let's begin the process of grabbing all that information so we can fill it in these blanks. So the next thing to do is to go to Google. You go to console.developers.google.com, APIs library. And this is where Google gives you access to all of its APIs so that you can create applications that interact with the Google apps. I want to first create a new project for this. So let's go into select a project and create a new project. And I'll call that Explore Temboo. All right, so that's a valid name. Create. Okay, so I've got my new texplore.temboo application created and it's already selected. And I would like to be able to use the Google Drive API with this application. You can see on the right side of the list of popular APIs is Drive API. And if I go to enabled APIs, you will see that the Drive API is not in the list of enabled APIs. So let's go back to Google APIs tab and select Drive API and click on Enable to enable it. Awesome. So this API is now enabled, but I can't use it until I create credentials. So I can access the credentials page by just clicking on this button here or from the left navigation bar on the side. So I'll just click on the blue button to go to the credentials page. So add credentials to your project. I'd like to use the Drive API, and I will be calling this from a web server. So I'm actually going to build a web server type of application here. So select web server, and I'll be accessing user data. Okay, I'll give a name to this project. I'm gonna call it to explore, so to explore Temboo project. The authorized redirect URI for Temboo and for my account is this. So this is the URI that Google will use in order when it responds to a request from a web server. It's temboolive.com callback Google, and the only adjustment that you need to make to yours is to change my username for your username. So my username is FutureShock. Just replace this part of the URI with your own username. And click Create Client ID. I need to, in step number 3, I need to provide a name to users. So I'll say to explore Temboo example app. I don't think there's anything else that I need. I don't need to put anything here for the homepage URL. There's none of that anyway, or a logo. That's fine. So I will click continue to move on to the next step. And this is the information that I need. I've got the client ID, which is one of the things that I need to supply to my Temboo Choreo. And there's also, just one back, there's also the client secret, which is a piece of information that is included in this download JSON format. So I'm going to download this file and go to my downloads folder. And here's a file that I just downloaded from Google. I'll just space it out a little bit better. Okay, so there's the client ID up here, and then the client secret is right there. So I'll keep this file handy so I can copy these pieces of the credentials to my Choreo in Temboo. All right, so done, all finished with this. You can also access your credentials by clicking on the name. You can see here that I've got the client ID and the client secret. All right. Now, let's try out this information. I'll go back in here and I'll take the client ID and paste it in the client ID field in the Choreo, and then the client secret, and paste that in the client secret field in the Choreo. I still don't have the refresh token, which is part of the credentials that I need. But let's ignore that for now. Let's see if this Choreo works anyway. I'm going to put some sample data that I'd like this Choreo to send to my Google Spreadsheet. And for spreadsheet title, I want to use the title of the spreadsheet that I created a few minutes earlier. So I'm going to copy this and paste it in here. And that's how Temboo knows which spreadsheet to use. Let's click on Run to try and see if this Choreo works. No, it doesn't. So there's an error. So you must provide a valid access token or the client ID, client secret, and refresh token. I've provided all of the above except for the refresh token. Now to get a refresh token, I need to follow a two-step process in order to do the O authentication part, OAuth. So with Google, that's done by executing these two Choreos. First, step number one is to initialize OAuth, and then the second one is to finalize OAuth. So let's start with initialize. I'm going to open this in a new tab. And I'm going to copy the same credentials for my client ID as earlier. So my client ID here is this. So that goes here. Now for the scope, because I'm trying to access a Google spreadsheet, then the scope for that spreadsheet is this: spreadsheets.google.com feeds. So let's run this. There's nothing else to fill. And run it, and then the response from Google is this. It says that this is the authorization URL. This is the URL that I need to load in my browser in order to manually provide access to Google Spreadsheets to Temboo. So let's do that. I'm going to copy this long URL and open up a new browser and paste it in here. All right, so this is the account that I use with that spreadsheet. And it says that, do you grant access to Temboo to view and manage your spreadsheets in Google Drive? I say, yep, of course I do. The response is a blank page from Google, and that is okay. You can notice here that the return URL is futureshock.temboolive.com, which is the response URI that we configured the Google API application earlier. So it's blank, which is okay. I can go back, and now that I've granted the required permissions, I can copy this callback ID. I can actually use this callback ID in order to complete the OAuth process. So let's start up the finalize OAuth Choreo and finish up the process. So click on the second Choreo, and for client ID, it's the same client ID as earlier. So copy that and put it in client ID. For client secret is this one here. And then for the callback ID, it's this response from Temboo that I need. So I'll copy that and paste it in here. All right, so all the fields are completed. Let's run it, run this Choreo, and we got success from Google. And now Google has returned an access token, which I will copy and go back to my Google Spreadsheet Choreo and paste that in here. Great. So I've got all the information filled in for the Google Spreadsheet Choreo. So let's see if it works. I will run it. There's success. So the response from Google is success. And if I go to my spreadsheet, you'll see that I've got two values added in the first data row of my spreadsheet. Let's try that again. I'll make that an 11 and I'll make that a 21. And there's the new row added by the Choreo. And it's awesome. Now this tells me that this Choreo works. Of course, it works On Temboo, I haven't integrated the Arduino in the system yet, so I can do that next. But at this point, I know that the Choreo is working. In the next lecture, I'll show you how to set up the Arduino so that it can become part of this Choreo setup, and then we can get data from its sensor and store them in the Google Spreadsheet.